Hello, Uncle Ted, your ice cream alchemist with ice cream every day, and this is blueberry pancake ice cream for National Ice Cream for Breakfast Day. Now, I think that's a way of life, but that's just me. And I have to say, this stuff was one of the best ice cream flavors I have ever made. It is absolutely incredible, and I definitely think you need to make this. Now, as far as how we make it, well, it's actually a little bit different recipe than what I normally do. I found this recipe online and I stole it. This is going to have cup and a half of heavy cream, cup and a half of milk. It's going to have 4 egg yolks. For blueberries, I used a pint of blueberries with a quarter cup of sugar. And for the ice cream base, that's going to have half a cup of maple syrup along with quarter cup of sugar. Then I used a teaspoon of vanilla as well as an eighth of a teaspoon of guar gum, and then 1 tablespoon of butter extract. Now, I have to say, this is a little bit different recipe than I normally do, and it's nice to get out of your comfort zone, and it was well worth it. We start off by taking our eggs and separating them. That's one of the things about this recipe is that it did have 4 egg yolks, and so I had to be careful to separate these. Now, once I got these egg yolks separated, I went back in and I picked off the boogers. You notice how egg yolks have that little white thing? It's like an umbilical cord for the chicken, but they look like boogers. So what I did was I went through and I picked out the boogers because they never seem to mix well, and it's always a problem. And I didn't want to deal with it. I wanted this to be smoother, so I went back in and I picked out all the little boogers that were in there. Next, what I did was added the milk and just the milk along with my sugar and the maple syrup, and I gave that a mix. Now, I mixed it very slow with my spatula. You'll notice that this time I did not use my whisk. I used my spatula. The reason why is because I didn't want to create bubbles, and I didn't want to make anything separate or basically traumatize the dairy. I want to be very gentle with this and make sure that when I stirred it, I got everything incorporated and I got everything off the bottom so nothing stuck and nothing scorched, but I didn't want to create bubbles. And so that's how I did this. And like I said, it's the milk and just the milk. I did not add the heavy cream at this point. We're going to add the heavy cream later. This recipe is a little bit different, like I said, than what I normally do, and that definitely made a difference, I think. In fact, I'm going to be using this technique for a couple other videos just to see how well it goes. Now, I heated this slowly because I didn't want it to scorch, and I didn't want to have any issues with any burning on the bottom of my pan, and as a result, I took my sweet time, and it worked out well, I think. As it slowly got darker from the maple syrup and reduced a little bit, and I just made sure to heat this up. Now, ideally, you want to get this to about 180 degrees, which means that it's going to be real hot but not boiling, and you're going to see, vapor coming off the top. But that just means that we have gotten it properly heated. And the reason why we got to get it good and hot is because what we're going to do next is incorporate the eggs. Now, you've seen me do this before, where I temper my eggs. Now, basically what that does is we're going to heat the eggs up without cooking them. The way we do that is we have to slowly add our ingredients, or our dairy, and whisk it in there to give them a good mix. We don't want scrambled eggs, which means we don't want to shock the eggs, but we're going to cook them. So the way we keep from having scrambled eggs is we slowly bring those eggs up to temperature. And I'll admit, I use my whisk to do this, and I put too much air into it, and I incorporate too many bubbles, but we got through it. And so once you have that done, once you have that incorporated, then you're going to want to put that back on the heat. Once you get it back on the heat, you're going to want to not crank it up too high, but obviously you're going to want to heat it up. Get it to about 180 degrees. Ideally, you want to have it over 165 for at least 1 minute to cook out all the cooties. And so once you get it up above there and cook out all the cooties, then you're good to go. You'll notice that there's some foam on this and some air bubbles. I was really hoping to avoid that. It came out okay in the end, but I was really hoping to avoid that. So I was a little disappointed that I whisked it so heavily when I was incorporating the dairy into my eggs. We know that the eggs are cooked when I can take out my spatula and draw my finger across and get a line, and that line doesn't automatically collapse or run. That means our eggs are cooked and our base is done. Now it's a bad camera angle, I'm sorry about that, but what we do is we go ahead and take that out of the pan, and then we're going to put that into a bowl. What I'll do next is I will bring in the rest of my dairy. So that is going to be 1.5 cups of heavy cream, and I'm going to add that along with the rest of the ingredients. And I tried not to whisk this too much because I really didn't want to have too much of a mess, but unfortunately, it took a little bit of time. Now this is some salt that I added. This was a teaspoon of salt, along with, I said, a teaspoon of vanilla, as well as a tablespoon of the butter extract. Now this is my first time working with butter extract, and I had never had any before, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but I gotta say that really did add an interesting dimension to this recipe, and it really made it, because this ice cream has a wonderful buttery aftertaste. Just wonderful stuff. You get done eating it and you get that buttery lingering flavor in your mouth, and it's just like, oh yeah, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. So once I went ahead and got that in, then I make sure to cover that up in plastic. And like I always say, you want to make sure that the plastic is actually touching the surface of your base. It's important because you don't want a skin to form. Now for the blueberries, I did that separate off camera. That's just a pint of blueberries, quarter cup of sugar, cooked it down, and then once I got it all cooked down and smashed, then I went ahead and put it in the fridge. And then what I did here after I put it in the ice cream maker is, instead of putting it in cups, I actually put this in a bread tin, because I don't have an ice cream holder. That's going to be next, obviously, but for now I don't have one. So what I did was I put my bread pan in the freezer for a couple hours to get good and cold. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do layers. So I go ahead and put in a layer of my ice cream. Now keep in mind, this is like almost a soft serve stage, and the reason for that is because it just didn't freeze super solid. I will admit that I made a mistake with the sugar, and while I should have stuck to the recipe, I accidentally added a little more, so it didn't exactly freeze. But what I'll do is I'll layer. So I put in some ice cream, put in some blueberries, and then I'll alternate with some more ice cream on top of that, and then just keep going back and forth until it's all in the bread pan. And then once I've got it all alternated and in the bread pan, I'll mush it down and make sure there's no air gaps, because that's important. You want to make sure that you don't have any air gaps. And then once that's all in, then I'll put plastic on top. Now, one of the things that I was going to say is I'm using my Cuisinart for this, and I dearly love this Cuisinart. Folks, Cuisinart makes several of these, and they're not paying me to say this, but honestly, if you're going to go get an ice cream maker, Cuisinart's the way to go. The frozen bowls work wonders. They work very well, and actually most of my ice cream bases, I pull them out of the refrigerator, put them in my ice cream maker, and they're done within 15 minutes. So it really does help, and plus they stay cold enough I usually can get a second batch run through, except in the summer when it's scorching hot. But once I got this in, I just got this out of the ice cream bowl, worked great. Then I make sure to pat it down and get all the air bubbles out, and I put that in the freezer. Now, I actually cooked up some bacon to go with this, some candied bacon. I took some bacon, put it in the oven with some brown sugar and honey on top, and I ended up with some wonderful candied bacon. And that's what I put on top of the ice cream to kind of gild the lily, as you would. And this was wonderful. Ice cream for breakfast day is important to me. It really is. And as you know, I've always said that eating ice cream for breakfast is something that everybody should do as an adult. But this day was really important, and I think I hit it out of the ballpark, which means that you have something that you can make at home that is fantastic. And I do want to thank you for your support. If you're not eating ice cream for breakfast, what's the point of being an adult? Thank you.